You're giving your time, and I welcome your questions. I'd just like to make a few comments about the report of the Justice Committee into the Treaty Principles Bill that has come out today. The report has had 300,000 submissions and not a glove laid on the idea that all Kiwis are equal in their rights. They have instead raised a number of alarming concerns that show why the Treaty Principles Bill should be passed into law. This report has in fact redoubled my commitment and the ex-party's commitment to ensuring that all Kiwis are equal and recognised as equal with universal human rights before the law. I'd like to run through some of the objections that were raised. I know that there will be people who will point out that the weight of submissions is not proportional to public opinion. I've experienced this before in my career when I was responsible for the End-of-Life Choice Act. 90% of submissions on the end-of-life choice opposed the bill, and yet when it went to a referendum, it managed to pass by 2 votes to 1, with 3 million New Zealanders voting in that referendum. What the arguments in the submissions have done is show us why it is in fact important to recommit ourselves to equal rights for all. A number of submitters have made the argument that Māori never ceded sovereignty in the treaty. There are 2 issues with that. One is the historical record where some rangatira or chiefs even argued against signing precisely because they believed it would mean that they were ceding sovereignty. But more importantly, a group of people who have made submissions to Parliament are arguing against the first principle in the Treaty Principles Bill, that in actual fact Parliament does have the full right to make laws in New Zealand, and they seem to believe that because they themselves are submitting to Parliament. More importantly than that is the fact that if Parliament does not have the ability to make laws in New Zealand, then the entire certainty that people require to build their lives, their families, their homes and their businesses under one clear set of laws in this country is eroded. And I think we've had a taste of the anarchistic vision of New Zealand with twin sovereignties through the hijinks and antics of Te Pāti Māori surrounding the bill. We've had people say that Parliament cannot interpret the treaty, that Parliament is unable to process a complex issue. In actual fact, Parliament is the representative of the people. Its membership is directly proportional to the wills of the New Zealand people, and if it is true to say that Parliament cannot decide what our collective destiny as a country is, then what people are really saying is that New Zealanders should be disenfranchised from deciding their destiny, and that is a recipe from disenfranchisement to disenchantment and ultimately discontent and disunity in our country. Parliament must remain the highest court in the land. Some submitters pointed out that some other countries have different Indigenous rights in their constitutional setup. Some have used Canada as an example, a country where I happened to live for 5 years. The idea that because other countries have done it, it's something we should be willing to copy is simply illogical. And once you start to look at the state of Indigenous relations in a country like Canada, where they have taken a different view from equal rights, you quickly see that that is not something that we should wish to emulate as a country. There's been quite a contradiction, and I'd like to read out one passage between people who say that there's no need for the bill because Māori do not have special rights, and that the bill, on the other hand, should be opposed because it would somehow reduce the special rights that Māori in fact have. There was a passage in the Green Party Minority View which reads, "One often repeated statement was that Māori were given special privileges under the Resource Management Act. There was no substantive evidence provided for this, and the Auckland City Council in its oral submission rejected that this is the case." It goes on to say, "It is true that where there is an application for a resource consent for a use outside of the district plan, the interests of Māori, including local iwi and hapu, are relevant to decision making. However, it is hard to understand how consultation with the mana whenua is in any way a special privilege." Well, in fact, there are requirements under the Resource Management Act as it stands to consult mana whenua separately and at a different level from other submitters. In one paragraph, they managed to go from saying there are no special rights to point out exactly one of the special rights that the law or this bill is designed to confront. I think it's important to recognise also I believe that the objection to the bill I took most seriously, and that was the suggestion that Māori have a group right to language and culture that would be endangered by this bill. I believe that Māori language and culture is very important. As I said in my 2023 Waitangi Day speech up at Waitangi, it is critical that we should cherish the Māori language and culture. That is something I think we should all want to do. It's a beautiful language. It can be a very beautiful culture. However, it cannot be true that that is only possible with specific treaty protection. For one thing, there is nothing that stops us from having arts funding for kapa haka, as we saw with Te Matatini not so long ago. That does not require specific treaty protection. It is also true that we have had school choice, and people like me who do not believe that the treaty is a partnership are some of the prime movers promoting the idea of charter schools or kura horua that are precisely designed to give people the freedom and choice to pursue their own objectives and have their own access to language and culture under the law. Welcome, folks. Sorry to see. I'll let you set up and we'll carry on because I think these guys were live streaming, but thank you for being here. There's also been people who have made the point that the bureaucracy criticised the Treaty Principles Bill. Well, of course the bureaucracy criticised the Treaty Principles Bill. That was the most predictable thing that happened, because the whole point of the Treaty Principles Bill is that the bureaucracy and the courts and the Waitangi Tribunal, for that matter, have invented a set of principles that are inconsistent with liberal democracy. If we thought they had it right, we wouldn't have introduced this bill. So it's completely unsurprising that we've seen criticism from the bureaucracy of the bill. A lot of people have said that the bill is divisive. I believe the bill has revealed division, and actually the existence of that division is one of the primary reasons why the bill should in fact be passed. What the bill has shown is that many New Zealanders do not believe we all have equal rights, do not believe that Parliament has the sole right to govern and make laws in New Zealand. In actual fact, it has shown there is a large number of New Zealanders, both Māori and non-Māori, who believe that we are in what the Court of Appeal considered, quote-unquote, a partnership between races, where two children born side by side in two beds in the same hospital on the same day should actually have a different role in our society based on which side of that treaty partnership they're on. That is divisive. That has grown up over the past 40 years, particularly since the Lands case in the Court of Appeal. That is what this bill seeks to address, and yes, it has revealed the division, but it has not caused division that began many years before this bill was even drafted. I'd like to conclude by saying that we will never give up. It doesn't matter how many of our political colleagues fail to support equal rights. New Zealanders are ready to have this discussion, even if some of their leaders may appear to be letting them down. And we will continue to promote the idea that all Kiwis are equal, or ake forever, because it is a fundamental truth that each of us are equal in our rights and our dignity, and our laws should reflect that simple truth. We certainly look forward to the debate that I'm sure will arise around this bill in the week to come. I thank you for listening. I decided to keep my introductory remarks a little bit longer to give TV1 time to be here, very important. I know it's been tough battling Auckland's traffic today, but for now, we're ready to take questions.
Well, it's just a waste of time, given that time, money, social cohesion, given the outcome?
Well, first of all, the outcome is that we have a bill that I think has really enlightened the debate, and it's shown why equal rights are so important. It's also shown why the objections to all Kiwis being equal are often self-contradictory or illogical and weak, and I think that's a very important thing for New Zealand to have.
The overwhelming majority of people who submitted have opposed the bill, so do you think that you potentially overestimated the support for the bill?
Well, as I said, I had the end-of-life choice bill. 90% opposed it, but it passed in referendum by 2 million to 1 million. Issues like this often bring out disproportionate responses at Select Committee. That doesn't mean that New Zealanders don't overwhelmingly support the idea that Parliament is sovereign, all people's rights are equal, and that all people's rights should be upheld equally.
Except in this context, though, it was about how many submissions were made, because obviously that is what is needed for the bill to pass. So within that context, do you think that you overestimated the support?
Well, just tell me again what you're trying to say there. You believe that somehow the submissions decide whether the bill is passed? I mean, that's never been true. I've just given you an example of a bill where the complete opposite occurred.
Except based on the report that's just come through, that is based on the submissions that have been put forward, and therefore within that context, based on the submissions and the fact that the majority of people who submitted did not support the bill, do you think you overestimated your support? Well,
I mean, I don't. I'll try again because I've just answered that twice. Select Committee submissions, especially on high-profile bills, have often been very different from public support. But what's more, if people believe that the public don't support this, they should not be opposed to having a referendum on it. If people really believe that most New Zealanders don't want Parliament to be sovereign, don't want our rights all to be equal, let's have a referendum and see how people vote. But we know that when we ask New Zealanders those questions, by a ratio of about 2 to 1, they do favour these principles. If it sounds like you believe that somehow Select Committee submissions are some sort of proxy referendum that decide whether a bill proceeds, that I can tell you as someone who has been on Select Committees for 6 years of my life and Parliament for 11 years of my life, that's just not how it works.
Were you surprised by these numbers, though?
Not really. Often when you have a bill that is high profile, it leads to a lot of, I guess, campaigns to get people to spam the committee, and a lot of people who hold the majority view are too busy working and paying taxes. So as a result, you get this. We got it with end-of-life choice. We'll get it with this. We've had it with a lot of bills over the years.
So this is spam, then? Anything that disagrees with what you say?
No, I just know that there's a very large number of submissions that if you were to look through them, would you say, is this a thoughtful contribution? Probably not.
It could be the other way around, though, as well.
Well, it certainly could be, but what we have done is looked at the summaries of the submissions and the submissions that have real substance, and then asked ourselves, is there really good arguments? Because there'll be people who want to make this a de facto referendum. My argument is have a referendum, but actually the point of Select Committees is to hear what the arguments are, and I defy anyone to find a compelling argument in these submissions that actually shows why we're not all universally equal and why Parliament shouldn't be making laws, which are really the two things that come out of it.
It costs $6 million for this bill to go nowhere. So how is this a good use of taxpayer money?
Well, again, I think this is why people are perhaps becoming a little tired of media bias. It hasn't gone nowhere. It has produced a report which outlines some of the most critical issues of the day, and I think advances the debate about why we need equal rights in this country. Now, if you ask me, why do you believe that this bill is worthwhile despite it potentially not succeeding because other people won't vote for it, that would be a more civil way to ask your question, but that's up to you.
Okay, well, you can understand, though, that after cuts to the public sector and the millions of dollars spent on this bill, which you say wasn't successful, sure...
no, I'm sorry, again, the bill has been reported back. It still needs to be voted on.
Okay, so then this process hasn't been successful, I'll word it like that.
Well, no, actually, this process has been very successful.
Okay, but given the overwhelming number of submissions against it, surely you can see that people might sort of bringing into question your priorities about unnecessary spending, given it costs $6 million.
Well, first of all, it hasn't cost $6 million. That's just completely untrue. Some people have asked, well, how much of the time of people who were already working in Parliament and already working at the Ministry of Justice has been used, and they've tried to calculate a figure from that, but the reality is if they weren't doing this bill, they would still be paid to be at Parliament every day doing a different bill. So a better question would be, do you believe that this bill was worthwhile doing if it meant that some other bill couldn't be debated? And I would say absolutely, because the meaning of our founding document cannot be that we're divided into a partnership between races. It must be that this country is a place where all Kiwis are equal, where all people born or who legally immigrate here have the same basic rights and dignity. That is what is being achieved here.
Are you going to talk to Christopher Luxon about this result, or is he going to call you? What's the story there?
Well, again, they've been pretty clear about their view. I would say to them, New Zealanders are ready for this debate. They don't deserve to be let down by their leaders. The bill should be able to proceed to a referendum, and I believe it would succeed handsomely if New Zealanders were given a vote. But ultimately, look, I've done quite a lot of lobbying of Chris and others. I guess really it's up to them.
So then where are you at with your desire for a referendum? What would be the next steps? What are you hoping to see?
Well, the bill has to pass through Parliament, so I'll be arguing that people should vote for the bill when it comes before Parliament, because the bill leads to a referendum. If we don't succeed this time, then we will be always committed to equal rights, and as the next few months unfold, we'll be showing people how else we can achieve that if we don't achieve it this way.
You say if it does succeed, is there some confidence there from you that it would, even after this?
Well, the thing is, New Zealanders overwhelmingly want this right. We know them from asking. The facts are that there are some leaders who are not ready for the conversation, even when the average New Zealander is. I would hope that political leaders would say, no. These are important issues. There's a record number of submissions. Clearly people care about it. When you go out to a proper sample of New Zealanders, actually they overwhelmingly want the bill to succeed because they support its principles, and then maybe it should be given more airtime. I believe it should. If other people don't want to do that, that's up to them.
So how are you saying that there's overwhelming support for the bill? Where is a sample, given the majority of submissions?
Yeah. Look, let me just, I mean, this is going to be interesting for the people watching the live stream, I'm sure. For the fourth time, let me address this. The submissions in a select committee often are not proportional to the overwhelming opinion out there in the New Zealand public. Let me just run through this.
But you would say that, wouldn't you?
Well, no. I'm saying no. Can I let me? Because you've asked the question 3 or 4 times now, and I've tried to answer it. So what we've just said in a release that's out, you can read it later if you like. In December, reputable polling company, 1,000 people asked, do you agree with the following statements? The Executive Government of New Zealand has the full power to govern, and the Parliament of New Zealand has full power to make laws in the best interest of everyone and in accordance with the rule of law and the maintenance of a free and democratic society. Support 45%, oppose 24%. The Crown recognises and will respect and protect the rights that Hapu and Iwi Māori had under the Treaty of Waitangi Te Tiriti o Waitangi at the time they signed it. However, if those rights differ from the rights of everyone, this applies only if those rights are agreed in a settlement of a historical treaty claim under the Treaty of Waitangi Act 1975. Support 42, oppose 25. Principle 3, as proposed by the bill. Everyone is equal before the law. Everyone is entitled without discrimination to the equal protection and equal benefit of the law and the equal enjoyment of the same fundamental human rights. Support 62, oppose 14. So we can go around again, but that is what happens when you ask New Zealanders at large what they believe in respect of these 3 principles.
How many in the poll?
1,000.
So moving on, you said it didn't cost $6 million, so can you clarify then how much it did actually cost?
Well, it actually costs the cost of Parliament being able to do a different bill with the same people who are paid at the same time.
A figure, a monetary figure, how much did it cost? 6 million, because that's the number we have.
Well, yes, I know that's the number you have, but I don't think you understand why you have it. Look, the thing is that the bill is worked on by people who already work for the Ministry of Justice, who already work for Parliament. Now, if they weren't doing this, they would be doing another bill. So the cost, you talk about the economic cost is what you give up in order to do something. Look, that is basically, they couldn't do perhaps another bill while they were doing this. We don't know what that bill might have been, but I would argue that having a proper debate about the true meaning of our treaty and whether it is something that actually divides us or unites us equally, I think that's a really worthwhile debate to have.
Te Pāti Māori had some strong words, obviously, and it's you can expect that. And I won't read them all out, but they said that the legislation is based on a false historical narrative. that was designed to take away Indigenous rights. How would you respond to that?
Well, again, it's not taking away any rights. It's saying that Māori rights should be upheld. I mean, that's written in black and white in the bill. But it's also acknowledging that there's people from all walks of life living in New Zealand now, and they should all have equal rights. So it's not about, taking away. It's about saying that tiroranga tiratanga in the second article is really something that should apply to everybody. So, if they can tell me which rights do they think will be taken away, and this is what's really interesting about this debate, is that so often people will say, well, look, we don't believe Māori have any special rights. Then they say, you're taking our rights away. Well, it can't be both. Either you all have equal rights, and that's great, and you should support the bill, or you have different rights you're worried will be taken away, in which case we need to have a discussion about which ones they are. So I think, Te Pāti Māori, the one thing is that they almost never speak in terms of specifics, and I think it would be helpful if they did, because then we could get down to the nitty-gritty of where this anxiety is coming from.
Do you think that Māori have equal rights in practice?
Yeah, I do. Do they have equal outcomes? I think that's a different argument. And my argument is that a lot of New Zealanders are disadvantaged for a whole lot of different reasons. And we should want to have policies that help people overcome their disadvantage. But I also just make the point that not all Māori are disadvantaged. I'm Māori, I don't feel disadvantaged, thank you very much. But not all disadvantaged people are Māori. And we're much better to try and help people based on need rather than grouping people by their ancestry. I think that's an inherently divisive thing to do, and it's also kind of an inaccurate way of targeting people's need. Yeah.
In terms of public submissions, though, what would it have taken, what percentage would it have taken for you to abandon that bill?
No.
You wouldn't have cared?
Well, here's the thing. I'm here for arguments. If you want to talk about numbers, look at overwhelming public opinion and send it to referendum. If you want to talk about arguments, what I got out of this is 300,000 submissions, for and against, not a glove laid on the idea of equal rights. And if anything, many of the submissions were so alarming because they said that we should all be divided by our ancestry. They've actually given me even more reason to keep progressing equal rights for all New Zealanders. Sorry, sir.
Did the bill promote equality over equity?
I think that's probably true, but the issue is if you want to achieve equity, then you don't necessarily need to divide people up by ancestry. And so if you believe in equity, I just make the point that even two siblings who grow up in exactly the same household, exactly the same conditions, often end up with quite different lives despite everything being the same. When governments have tried to make everybody equal, generally the record of history is it's been a complete disaster. I think what's really important is that we all have equal rights between the law, before the law, sorry. If there are two neighbours and they're both considering objecting to a resource consent in their region, then I believe that they should both have the same rights. It shouldn't be that one person, by virtue of their ancestry, should have a different right from the other. That's what the RMA currently says. If we're going to select, a board of people to govern a community resource, then all people should have the same vote and the same right to be represented on it. That's a democratic society.
How happy are you with the debate that's sprung up around this bill?
Look, it's been a really tough debate, but that reflects the underlying conditions. New Zealand is divided on this issue, so I wouldn't say I'm happy to be having it. There's lots of other things we could be talking about, but we need to have it, and I'm very proud that actors had the bravery, the articulateness and the patriotism to actually bring a difficult issue to the fore that people want debated, but very few people in politics are prepared to do.
Has this outcome from the Select Committee been embarrassing for you?
Well, I don't see why that would be. If there were compelling arguments against the bill that we've put up, then we'd have to reconsider, but there's nothing embarrassing about that. That hasn't happened. So I guess, if anything, it has just confirmed that there are no good arguments against all Kiwis being equal, but there are some very important reasons why it's probably become more urgent in light of some of the views people have.
Is it disappointing that your coalition partners haven't come around to your argument?
Look, Kiwis are ready for this debate. They overwhelmingly want the debate, and yet not all of their leaders have had the courage that they're showing to front up and have it.
And you mentioned referendum. Is that the next step then for you in terms of progressing this bill? Is that where?
Well, if you're asking about a citizen-initiated referendum, I ruled that out a long time ago. There are some people who would like to see that. The referendum in this bill would have been held only after the bill had passed. That may still happen if people change their mind in the next few weeks. But you know, if they don't, then just watch over the coming months running up to the next election. We'll talk about what the next steps are to make sure that all Kiwis are equal.
So could this be a feature in a future coalition agreement, this bill?
I would never rule out. We're never giving up. Equal rights are too important. And, you know, to be honest, it wouldn't matter. I mean, the country is in favour of equal rights, but even if the whole country was opposed to it, I'd still say that all people having the same basic rights is the right policy. Yeah. All right. Thank you very much, thank you very much, folks. This has been great fun. And live stream's going to be a cracker for a lot of people, and I really hope that you guys have a great day and get home safe in the wet Auckland roads. I'm assuming that you don't want to ask me about any other issues, otherwise I'll get on. All right, thank you very much, guys. Cheers.
Thanks.